this is kind of a non sequitur after that presentation about, I mean, I'm going to talk about the other supply chain, which is planet Earth, within which all of the supply chains rest. And as you see here, drawdown, the term means the first time on a year-to-year basis where greenhouse gases peak and go down. And we felt if we're going to work on this issue of climate change and global warming, we ought to name the goal. And really, nobody's named the goal. And I'll get back to that. What was it that really inspired me? Well, I've been in the environment for 40 years, but this next slide, which is a little raucous and harsh in noise, is what really turned it around for me. This is Greenland in the summer. This is the North Eemian Ice Research Station. You can turn the sound up a little if you want, but not. I mean, it's cold. This is June, and that's an ice cave. And you go down the ice cave, and what are they doing down there? They're drilling down 2 miles to bedrock and ice. And I won't. Oh, you can see some of this. This is actually really warm down there compared to every place else because it's like a big igloo. And these are the guys and the women who are the scientists. And this is what they do. They bring up ice cores. And the ice cores, you can basically go year to year with the bubbles that are in the ice core, and you can detect sulfate levels, CO2 levels, pollen count, everything. And with that, you can determine exactly what was happening in the climate over the last 125,000 years, because it's called the North Eemian Ice Research Station, because it goes down to the Eemian period, which is here. And what you see here is really CO2 levels for the past 400,000 years. And that circle there is the Eemian period. That was the period in which the temperature, the average temperature, was 1 to 2 degrees Celsius higher than it was in the pre-industrial age. So we're about 1 C higher right now, by the way. So this is 1 to 2 C. The oceans were 20 to 30 feet higher. There was basically a hippopotamus lounging in the Thames River Delta. There was no Kent and no Sussex. There was crocodiles going up the coast of British Columbia to Alaska to breed, and there was giraffes and lions romping through Germany and Denmark. So that was 1 to 2 C. We're at 1 C right now. But here's the most important thing about this slide. This is where we really are. 490, not 407, 490. Why? Because when you hear about the level of CO2 gases in the atmosphere, you're only hearing about CO2. You're not hearing about nitrous oxide, methane, HCFCs. You're not hearing about those. You add those in terms of their global warming potential, and we're at 490. Now, why do I make this point? Because what you hear, and we'll talk more about that, is the rhetoric around climate change is what? Mitigation, reduction, stabilization, right? You hear these words. But humanity, Homo, genus, our genus, Homo, has never lived on the planet over 300 ppm, that dotted line, for 2 million years. It's the highest it's been in over 15 million years. So all I'm saying is we're in Terra Nova. We have no idea what's going to happen. And there's a big lag time in terms of climate and weather and high levels of greenhouse gases. But as I said, we just don't know where we're going. The idea that we should mitigate is what you hear. Mitigation means to reduce the pain of something. And if you see something here where we want to mitigate or stabilize, I don't see it. And when I saw this, when I was with those scientists in Greenland, it made clear to me that we need to name the goal. If you're going over a cliff, slowing down doesn't change where you're going. You got to stop and go the other way. And to me, unless you name a goal, and you know this in your enterprise, you're not going to achieve it because you don't know what you're doing. So our goal has to be reversal. And the point I want to make about that is that when you expand the goal and scope of what you're going to do, you actually enliven creativity, imagination, innovation, rather than shut it down. So right now, this is the way most people get their science. They get it in headlines which are based on very good peer-reviewed literature. The headline's good. The picture is a bit alarming. The Tower Bridge in London, right? And then, of course, but what you have to understand is the internet uses things to adrenalize you, so you go to the clickbait. This is really clickbait. Feeder information. It's not really about the science. And so next to that, you have that wonderful little thing about this woman, smashes her husband's head with a frog ornament and mummifies him for 18 years. You go, wow, okay. How interesting is that? Somehow there's an equivalency here between the Tower Bridge going down and this frog ornament and mummy, and you see it here too. This one, you see the headline, absolutely peer-reviewed study, Peter Bates, Oregon State, solid. What you see here is 20 things you could never do with Coca-Cola, and they're pouring it down the toilet, And of course, which is the right thing to do, actually, but I did this, I said that in Atlanta once, and it did not go well, but... So most people get the information this way if they are empowered to do something about this information, and they Google, what can I do about climate change? What can I do about global warming? These are the two top hits from two scientific organizations, Scientific American and Union of Concerned Scientists. And I don't know about you, but that first list, in fact, the whole thing pretty much, but that first list, we call those proverbs where I come from, not solutions. The sixth one should be love your mother or, pet your dog. I don't know. I mean, it's like forego fossil fuels. Like, I dare anybody to do that for one day, just one day. It's impossible. It's impossible. And then on the Union of Concerned Scientists, you have, basically use power strips in your home entertainment center. It's like, right, okay, got it. And what happens when individuals see this is they know, unless they have an IQ lower than room temperature, they know that this isn't adequate to the task at hand. Like, come on. And so what does individuals do? They just shut down, they disengage, they go numb, they feel guilt, they feel shame. It doesn't work. And so 99% of humanity is disengaged about the most serious problem civilization has ever faced. Why? Because the way we communicated it. We're communicating about the probability of what can go wrong and how bad it will be and how fast it's going wrong. Grr. And we expect people to what? Rise up and do something? To engineer, to design, I mean, it's not going to happen. They're disengaged. It's not the science. There's 2.5 billion data points behind the 5th Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change assessment that came out 3 years ago. The science is incredible. It's the most amazing science project humanity's ever undertaken on a collaborative basis. But the science communication sucks, frankly. And so I wanted to know, where do we stand? You saw that graph. Is it game over? Are we just screwed? Where do we stand? Is it game on or game off? Or, I mean, no one, and I've been in the environmental field for 40 years. I'm a writer, I've authored 8 books. It's like I couldn't find out where we actually stood. If you listen to Al Gore, it's like solar, solar, wind, Elon Musk, and don't eat so many burgers. You go, woohoo. And as if that gives us a hall pass to the 22nd century, and that's a scientific howler. That's not true, and those are crucial solutions. So this idea that if we go to clean energy, we're good to go, it's not true, and we need to go to clean energy, of course, So I started Project Drawdown, a small NGO in Sausalito, California. Why there? Because it was in biking distance of my home, no other reason. And 2, do the following. Map, measure, and model the 100 most substantive solutions to reversing global warming. It's never been done. Not the top 80, 60, 50, 30, 20. No one's ever done it. Don't ask me why. That's an anthropological question. I have no idea why, after 45 years in the public sphere, we've never made a list of what we can do. So I knew then that if a small NGO in Sausalito did that, we would have all the credibility of a lentil, that is to say, who cares? And what we needed to do is do it as a collaboration with scientists and people from all over the world. We had to do it as a we. And so We did the same thing you do, which is we tried to recruit the best possible scientists or employees possible, except we had no money. So we sent out the word to universities all over the world, asking them to be Drawdown Research Fellows, and this is some of the people we got. 22 countries, 6 continents, half PhDs, all double degrees, Aga Khan Award winners, Fulbright scholars, Rhodes scholars, extraordinary people. Extraordinary people. Love these people. And we added to that 128 advisors. Some of these names you may recognize. Even, we talked about earlier, even Tom Brady is one of our advisors, because his wife is an advisor, Giselle Bundchen, but they're advisors. But we got advisors to help us and on the content. And then we also got 40 outside reviewers, scientific reviewers, to review the model. So it's a collaboration. And what we did was the math. And we say, and I'm sure it's true at Oracle, in God we trust, all others bring data. We are completely data hounds. We want to know the data, nothing else. And to do that, we relied on 2 sources, basically 2 streams of data. On what you see here is the ranking, and the ranking here of this solution, geothermal, is what it would do in terms of either avoided emissions, in other words, greenhouse gases we're not putting up there, or sequestered CO2 in a case of land use, forests, etc. And you see that in gigatons. Now that data is all peer-reviewed data, okay? Nothing else. Not an anecdote, not a belief, not an assertion, peer-reviewed. And then we did the numbers. If you don't do the numbers, if you don't do the economics, it's not very interesting and useful. So what is our source there? Again, internationally respected institutions, the IEA, the World Bank, FAO, IPCC. None of the data in Drawdown, which you see here, is our data. None. And we chose solutions that are extant. We know how to do them. They are scaling. And what we try to determine is if we continue to scale them at a rigorous but reasonable way, could we achieve reversal of emissions by 2050? Good question. We didn't know. That's why it was so fun to do it. And so what you see here on the number side is this solution compared to business as usual, which would be combined cycle gas or coal, and where geothermal is applicable and practical, what would be the difference in cost? In this case, it is less expensive. And the return over 30 years, as you can see, is $1 trillion. Total investment of all the solutions, by the way, to jump ahead, $123 trillion. The total return is way beyond that. So the idea is somehow if we do this, it's going to cost us money is really upside down and backwards, I think. And so what you're going to just see here is a variety of solutions. And I just want to give you a sense of the diversity. Watching Richard Jewell's presentation, I think, dang, I should have brought different slides because more technical ones, more about technical solutions, but I didn't. They're more about land use and people. This is other land use, coastal wetlands, tropical forests, there's afforestation again. Peatlands, those beautiful stripes, that's what happens. You take a forest, you see just above it, and then they just scrape it all off, and that's what's left. Peat is an enormous sink of carbon dioxide. This is a transport solution, high-speed rail, electric bikes, ride-sharing is meant to make you laugh, actually, but it's actually a big solution, mass transit. And this one is, when you think about reversing global warming or climate change, this doesn't come up very often. It should. Indigenous peoples' land management. Why? Because not only is he sitting on a rock, but indigenous people manage and control land on which and under which there is 849.3 gigatons of CO2 equivalent of carbon, basically, which is more than is in the atmosphere. And what you're seeing around the world is people going in there illegally and deforesting these lands, right? In Africa, in Peru, everywhere. And to go to, again, Richard's presentation, they're starting to use blockchain technologies actually to prevent that. It's really interesting. It's a great piece in the Times this week. Buildings and cities, again, not bikes, the infrastructure. You make an infrastructure, people will get on bikes. You don't, they're going to stay off them. Green roofs, walkable cities, smart glass, improved rice production. This reduces methane by 50%. Methane is 28 to 34 times more powerful than CO2. Both techniques actually improve productivity, reduce costs, and so you see no costs at all. It just takes one farmer walking across his or her paddy to the next one and teaching them how to do it. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. This is onshore wind. Give you a sense of scale of some of these turbines. Look at the net savings, 7.43 trillion. This is so conservative, this number. All our numbers are conservative. And I don't want to brag, but I'm going to for a minute, about the research our fellows did, is that we've been out for 8 months. Our book is now going into 11 countries. It is a New York Times bestseller. It was the best-selling environmental book of 2017 in the United States. But not one scientist has done a gotcha on our facts, which is we are just bracing ourselves. If there's any gotcha community in the world, it's scientists. And that's because we chose a really conservative number. And we have had many people say, it's better than that. And we're going, that's exactly what we're trying to do. Everything you see here actually is better than what you're seeing. This is onshore wind. This is, and again, you know, on the thing of how we communicate, what we see is these pictures, you know, of a hill. It's all green. It's got wildflowers. There's kids playing in the foreground. There's a wind turbine. It's a blue sky. You're going, oh, wow, the future. No, that's a really awful place to put a wind turbine. Wind turbines want to be where the weather is really crappy and pissy. This is the North Sea. This is Sheringham Shoal off Norfolk. Siemens, 3-megawatt wind turbines. And this is for a real triathlete. This is solar, yes. This is an Uru woman in Lake Titicaca. She lives on a straw island in a straw hut, and those are her daughters, and she's been using kerosene to light up her straw hut at night so her daughters could study. So her grin isn't really about climate. Her grin is about her family. And this illustrates something that if you look at the book or look at the website, you don't have to buy the book, look at 98 of the 100 solutions are what we call no-regrets solutions. They have so many cascading co-benefits that if there was not a climate scientist alive, and we were clueless as to what was causing extreme weather, we would want to do all 98 of them because they have so many benefits in terms of health, well-being, children, girls, water, jobs, prosperity. It goes on and on. And so this idea that somehow we're paralyzed by, well, we can't afford it, it's the other way around, we need to do these things. And this one, as it turns out, of course, we can make a heck of a lot of money doing this one. But I don't want to be reductionist and say we should do it because we make money. We should do it because of those two cute little girls. That's why we should do it. This is forest protection. This is a Kermode bear in the Great Bear Forest in British Columbia, snacking on a salmon. And this is the same as indigenous people's land management. I think these forests were all managed by indigenous people too at one time, but you know, what we did to indigenous people, same thing. Sitting on more carbon than is in the atmosphere. Okay, so these forests need protection desperately. And again, back to food here, back to food, composting, tree intercropping. And again, what I'm trying to show you is things that you don't hear about and think about when it comes to climate. It's much broader and greater and diverse and interesting than solar and wind, which are very important. But look at, I mean, managed grazing, tropical staple tree crops. I mean, you know, and what you see is the tonnage. And this is the number 3 solution. This is a huge, by the way, and I didn't put it there for that reason, supply chain issue. Because in the bulk of the world, not in the developed world, the bulk of the world, this is a supply chain issue. It's cold chains and everything. The food is wasted all along the way. It doesn't get to the person. In rich countries, it's wasted at the restaurant, the cafeteria. It's wasted at home. It's wasted, you know, refrigerators, basically where food goes to die. And, you know, and that's what happens. Poor people do not waste food. Rich people do. And so, but this does not measure the methane, the methanogenesis that happens when you landfill food. in an anaerobic environment, that food produces methane, again, 28 to 34 times more powerful than CO2. You count that, who knows where this would be a solution. And then I want to show you these, and this is why I would have showed a whole bunch of more technical solutions. In hindsight, invite me back. We have 20 coming attractions, and coming attractions are solutions that are scientifically validated, that are being implemented. There isn't the data yet for us to have peer-reviewed science or economics. Right? It's too new, it's nascent. The reason we include those is because it's important for us to understand that humanity is on the case. We're not asleep. We're brilliant. Humanity is ingenious. And there's just thousands and tens of thousands of people inventing and creating extraordinary solutions to reversing global warming. This is Dr. Brian Van Herzen, a plasma physicist, flew over Greenland for a friend, a glaciologist, starting in 2001, and to see how many melt ponds he could count, and he did for his friend in Europe. And then the next time, 2 years later, he noticed there was more of them, and many more. And then a year later, he noticed it became melt lakes, and then he could see how rapidly the Greenland ice sheet was melting. And he changed his whole life to basically restore living systems. And this is what he created. What you're seeing here is not what he created. He creates these frames made of recycled PET that are a kilometer square, that go down 25 feet under the water. And in them are these tubes that are actuated by the rise and fall of the ocean or the sea. Right? And they go down to the thermocline, to the cold, nutrient-laden waters that are there, and they just bring up those nutrients. Within weeks, this is what you see. You see phytoplankton, zooplankton, algae, kelp, forage fish, feeder fish. Kelp sequesters, draws down more CO2 than any living organism or plant on the planet. What does it do to the water? It deacidifies it, it reverses coral bleaching, it creates protein like crazy, and it does something, what's happening, because 93% of the heat from global warming is actually going into the oceans, not the land, it's going into the oceans, and it's creating these thermal blankets that are suppressing the natural circulation patterns in the oceans, which is why the tropical oceans are 99% now marine deserts. This is like reforestation, except it's doing it in the water. Extraordinary. This is repopulating the Mammoth Steppe, the Arctic Circle. 2 Russian scientists, actually a father and son, made a very important observation, which is we extirpated those animals, the Clovis people, 12,000 years ago. There was lots and lots of animals in the Arctic, wolves and buffalo and elk and muskox and the woolly mammoth, and it goes on, and we slaughtered them all. Hungry, cold, I guess. Not sure why we did, we humans, okay? But what happens is you bring them back, and what they do is that in the winter when it's dark and they're hungry and it's minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 100, they brush away the snow with their hoof or their snout, and they get to the dead grass. And that reduces the temperature by 2 degrees Celsius, which is a permafrost protection plan. So it's an ingenious way. You get ecological restoration, but you also get insurance and protection from the permafrost, which contains trillions of pounds of carbon, it is game over, by the way, if that melts. It's like game over, no question about it. It's a bomb. Just kidding. No, I'm not kidding, actually. This is building with wood, and you say, well, I wouldn't get in that building. Yes, you would. It's safer than steel and concrete. You say, no, that's not possible. CLTs, laminated beams don't burn, they char. in the Grenfell Tower fire in London, it wouldn't have happened if it was built of wood. It's so amazing. But what happens is there's a whole brand of architecture and development now that's saying the city should sequester carbon instead of being a source of carbon emissions, and buildings actually can sequester carbon. If you use trees from afforestation and you build structures out of them, you are now a carbon sink. And there's a building going up in London, 90 stories tall. It's all wood. No steel, no concrete. You know, I mean, there may be something in the computers or the desks, but there's no construction. It's not used for construction, right? So there's 50,000 skyscrapers going to be built in China in the next 30 years. And steel and concrete are 11% of emissions. You can flip it. This last one, a cow walks under a beach, is just two scientists and a farmer discovered that there is a algae. And it's a wonderful story, but basically an algae in the ocean that called Asparagopsis taxiformis, if fed to ruminants, reduces their methane emissions by 70 to 90%. This is observational science, and basically cows basically are 11 to 12% of all emissions from belching methane, which is such a powerful thing. So again, I just want to give you a sense of the idea of the spread, you know, of these solutions and imagination. What surprised us, we had no idea. If we had made a list of what the top solutions were, we would have been just like Al Gore. You know, wind, solar, wind, who knows, you know, EVs, you know, for sure. But that's not what happened. Food came out the #1 sector. Who knew? Food? What are you talking about? Why? Food is 24% of the emissions. It's like transport. The two of them are the two top sectors in terms of emissions. But food can do something in land use and regenerative agriculture and managed grazing and so forth. It can sequester carbon. So it's a twofer. That's why it's #1. Electrical generation is #2, but you combine land use, which is pretty much all of food except for plant-rich diet and food waste. I mean, it's extraordinary what we can do with biological systems. But what surprised us was #1. And we were so disappointed. If we wanted something really sexy, and it was refrigerant management, we're going, oh no, it's like refrigerant management, but it's true. It's, you know, 7, 8, 9,000 times more powerful than CO2 is the gases in our air conditioners and refrigerators, and they're just going up all the time from bad maintenance, and also from basically recycling in mostly the developing world. People throw them away and they recycle, up they go. And this is all, but this is also what surprised us. This little cutie pie, this is educating girls. And educating girls is there, #6, because if you yank a girl out of school, which is often done in other countries, to go to work for her brother, or early marriage, usually one of the two, for cultural reasons, religious reasons, who knows. She has a very different life, and she makes very different choices because she actually doesn't make many of those choices. They're made for her. If she's allowed to go to school and to high school, matriculate, she has an average of 2 children. The one yanked out of school has an average of 5+ children. And the one who has 2 children has more education, better income. She takes better care of her children. They're better off. They're healthier. They repeat their mother's behavior. What you have here is family planning, but it's not family planning from the top down. It's from the empowerment up. In other words, if you support girls' education, they make very different reproductive choices. We don't have to make the choices for them. They are very intelligent human beings, and they know what they want to do in this world. And you combine that with, well, family planning, the traditional way, which is clinics all over. And I don't just mean Africa, I mean Alabama too, and South Central, come on. For women so they can support their reproductive health and well-being, you put those two together, #6 and 7, The difference is the UN high and median population number in 2050. That's all it is. And the UN says it's due to family planning. And you put the two together, and the number one solution to reversing global warming is the empowerment of girls and women. That's number one. And again, why don't we hear that? Why do we keep hearing solar and wind? Again, very important. But the idea somehow there's a techno fix out there. Yes, there is, but that's not the whole picture. And basically what you're seeing here is all the solutions. It's the system that caused the problem. It's the system that heals it. In other words, it's everything. There's no such thing as a small solution. You know, they're all important. It's everything we do. And there's so many ways, we can't get into it today, but what you can do in terms of supply chain management. Just want to look at these terms, read that language, fight climate change, combat climate change, the climate battle, climate crusades, slash emissions, curb climate change. That's what you do to dogs in New York. You curb them, right? Curb climate change, the carbon war room, negative emissions, okay. Can you imagine having a team at your company that's going to start a new project and this is your mandate? We're going to fight, combat, slash. I mean, this is the language that is thrown out into the world about climate change and global warming. It's nuts. First of all, you can't fight change. Glenn, what did you say when you first started, right? Change is the constant. It's the constant in everything, and thank goodness it is. The climate is supposed to change. So this idea that we should fight change, combat change, the language is divisive. It sounded like the atmosphere is something other out there, and we're supposed to go to battle with it. No, it's an integral part, and what we want to do is reverse global warming, which we can do down here. That's a very, very different set of goals. So again, it's how we talk to each other, how we speak, and that's why in Drawdown, it's all about possibility as opposed to probability. It's saying, we get the science, it's fantastic, unbelievable, now let's work on the solutions. Seems pretty straightforward, really, and that's why we did Drawdown. And lastly, this thing of 2C, you hear it all the time, science-based target, 2 degrees Celsius. Maybe. It was pulled out of thin air by a scientist in 1994, Joachim Schellenberger in Germany. Not really science-based, but let's say it is. We're using that again and again to motivate people, and it's a future existential threat. Someday, it could be 2C and something bad is going to happen. And human brain is not wired that way. We're not wired to respond to future existential threat. Our ancestors aren't here who did that. They're out of the gene pool. The people are here, and your ancestors responded to current existential threat, war, famine, food, whatever it was. That's who we are. We don't respond to the future existential threat. And yet, the climate movement, establishment, keeps doing that, and nobody responds. This is why we're not engaged. The way to reverse global warming is to respond to human needs right now, which is job security, which is dignity, purpose, food, housing, health. That's how you reverse global warming, not by some far-off moonshot, you know. And finally, the scientists, we did the book. It says the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. I just want to, it sounds so brash, but actually, it was an intern from Stanford who proposed it at Penguin, our publisher, and I didn't like it at first because it seemed very brash. But I realized it was correct because no one's ever proposed a plan to reverse global warming. So it is the most comprehensive plan. It's the first one. I hope there's more. But that's what we should be proposing. And this is our favorite scientist advisor, Mark Watney. And I have him here because remember, if those of you who saw The Martian, at the end of The Martian, he came back from Mars, and he's the eminence gris, and he goes into a class, you know, of young, like I said, wannabe astronauts, and he talks to them. And what he says is, pay attention, because this could save your life, you know. He said, when I was up there, did I think I was going to die? He said, absolutely. Space does not cooperate. The atmosphere does not cooperate. Space does not cooperate. So basically said, listen, you can either, he said it's absolutely going to happen to you. In other words, you're going to think you're going to die. And you have a choice to make. You can either accept that, or you can basically go to work. And you said you do the math. I love that part. You do the math, and you solve one problem, and you solve another problem, and you solve enough problems, and you get to go home. That's the end of The Martian. And that's exactly where we are. When Andy Weir wrote The Martian, it was a metaphor for the Earth right now. It was not about Mars. It was about us. And so solving this is actually the greatest opportunity. It beggars the word opportunity. It's just astonishing what it is, because we're talking about the regeneration of life on Earth, and our societies, our places, our oceans, our lands, our forests, our farmlands, our food supply, our food chain. We're talking about basically reimagining what it means to be a human being on Earth at this time, and to think literally that basically to change the preposition about climate change or global warming, and the preposition now is happening to us. Like, I didn't do it. I got born now. It's like somehow we're the victim. We're not the victim. It's happening for us. It's feedback. And any system that doesn't respond to feedback dies. And this is the Earth being generous to us, nudging us a little bit, saying, hey, you're listening to me? Try this one. Listening to me? No, okay. Try this one. Now are you listening? This is feedback from a system that basically is life-giving. Thank you so much for what you do.